Darren stood in the workshop bedroom Eli had shown him, staring out the small window at the familiar but oddly unsettling sight of the forest beyond. The air was thick with an eerie calmness, broken only by the distant howl of one of the massive wolves that patrolled the grounds. The world had shifted under his feet since he'd arrived, and the things he had seen in the past day, demons, spirit wolves, elves, had shaken him more than any combat tour ever had. He sat on the edge of the bed, running a hand through his hair, trying to make sense of the day's events. Gunnar, his best friend and the strongest man he knew, was a shadow of his former self. He had expected Gunnar to be the same tough, indestructible man he'd known in the army. But what he'd found was a brother who had been broken, physically and mentally, by something far darker than Darren had ever imagined. Demons, Darren muttered to himself, shaking his head. What the hell did I get into? The scars on Gunnar's face, the missing eye, the bandaged arm. Those were just the surface wounds. Darren could see the deeper pain in Gunnar's remaining eye, the hollow look that came from seeing too much and losing even more. Darren had seen that look in soldiers after long tours in the worst places on Earth, but never in Gunnar. Darren knew there were no easy answers here. Gunnar had asked him why they kept fighting, why they kept standing in the dark so others could live in the light. Darren had answered without hesitation, telling him it was what they did, who they were. But the way Gunnar had looked at him, it was like he wasn't sure if that answer still held any weight. With a deep breath, Darren stood and paced the room, feeling the weight of the unspoken questions hanging between them. He wasn't sure how to get through to Gunnar, but one thing was clear, he wasn't giving up on him. Gunnar had dragged him out of the fire more times than Darren could count, and now it was Darren's turn to do the same. He was about to lie down when a strange light caught his eye. Outside the workshop, in the clearing, a swirling vortex of shimmering energy formed out of nowhere. Darren's eyes widened as the portal expanded, shimmering with a mixture of silver and blue light, almost like liquid magic. His heart raced, and he instinctively reached for a weapon that wasn't there. What the hell? He'd seen a lot of things in his time with Gunnar, things most men wouldn't believe, but this was on a whole new level. As the portal solidified, a tall figure stepped through, regal and glowing with an ethereal presence. The woman's long silver hair flowed behind her like a cloak, and she held a staff that seemed to radiate pure energy. The light from the staff illuminated the darkened clearing as if the sun itself had broken through the twilight. Darren's breath hitched. He had seen some pretty unbelievable things since arriving here, but this woman had an aura of power that made him instinctively uneasy. The woman, Aeliana Vale, he assumed from the way the others had spoken of her, stepped through the portal with the grace of someone who had lived for centuries. She paused briefly, surveying the landscape before walking toward the workshop, her silver staff glowing softly as the portal closed behind her in a burst of light. Darren blinked, trying to reconcile what he had just seen. He muttered under his breath, Gunnar's really gotten himself into something this time. Before Darren could even move, there was a soft knock on his door. Eli opened it just enough to peek inside, her eyes alight with determination. Darren, I think you'll want to see this, Eli said, her tone serious. I think I just did, Darren replied, still trying to shake off the disbelief from witnessing the portal. What was that? Eli smiled slightly, though there was an air of urgency in her voice. That's Aeliana Vale, our resident sorceress and protector of Alfheim. She's come to help us. I'm about to meet with her and Jewel about Gunnar. You can come or you can take a minute to process whatever it is you just saw. Darren shook his head, rubbing the back of his neck. I've already had enough to process for a lifetime, but yeah, I'll come with you. Eli led Darren down the hallway, and as they reached the main room, they saw Aeliana speaking softly with Jewel. Aeliana's eyes, filled with wisdom and something more, something ancient, shifted briefly to Darren, She gave him a small, knowing nod. Darren swallowed hard. Yeah, he thought, this just keeps getting weirder. As Eli and Darren approached the group, the air in the room seemed to shift. Eliana turned her gaze to Eli and said softly, "Are we ready to begin?" Eli nodded, giving Darren a brief glance. "Let's talk about Gunner's arm." Darren, still reeling from the sight of a literal portal opening up in front of him, could only watch as these women of power and knowledge discussed things beyond anything he'd ever imagined. And yet, standing there, witnessing the strange and impossible, one thought still echoed in his mind. Gunner? What the hell did you get us into? The conversation about Gunner's arm. Aliena Vale stood in the centre of the room, her ethereal presence radiating calm but undeniable power. Eli, Jewel, and Darren were gathered around her, and the atmosphere was heavy with both urgency and tension. Darren kept his distance, leaning against the wall, his mind racing to catch up with everything. Eli stepped forward, breaking the silence. "We need to talk about Gunner's arm." She glanced at Darren briefly before continuing. "I've been working on a prosthetic design for him, something that would not only replace what he's lost, but enhance it. A weapon that could be an extension of him, both physically and mentally." Eliana's silver eyes shimmered as she listened, her expression unreadable. "You believe this can help him regain his strength?" "Yes," Eli said confidently. "But more than that, if we fuse the prosthetic to his body, graft it to his bones using magic, it would become part of him, like a natural limb, but enhanced with all the capabilities we can build into it. The dagger, the flexibility, the strength. It wouldn't just be a replacement, it would be an evolution." Jewel, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "There's risk, though. Merging technology with magic is always dangerous. And Gunner, he's not in the best place mentally. We'd be fusing this to him permanently. Once it's done, there's no going back." Eliana studied Eli and Jewel for a moment, her gaze intense. The balance of his mind and soul must be taken into consideration. If his spirit is fractured, this could cause more harm than good. Gunner is struggling, yes. Eli nodded slowly. He's been distant, fighting his own demons. I don't know if this will help him or push him further into the darkness. Darren, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke up. "If you're asking me, I say we do it." Everyone turned to him, and he shrugged. "Look, I've seen what happens when soldiers get injured and lose parts of themselves, not just physically but mentally. Gunner's always been a fighter, but he's not invincible. The way he's been acting, he's lost more than an arm and an eye. He needs a reason to fight again. Maybe this will give him that." Eliana tilted her head, considering Darren's words. "You believe restoring his physical strength will help heal his spirit?" "I think it's a start," Darren replied. "He won't recover overnight, but Gunner's never been the kind of guy to lie down and die. You give him back some of his strength, some of that fire. Maybe it'll remind him of who he is, who he's always been." Eli exchanged a look with Jewel, her mind already turning over the technical details of the prosthetic. "If we go through with this, I'll need your help, Eliana. Your magic can fuse the arm to him in a way that technology alone can't. And Jewel, your medical expertise will make sure his body can handle it." Jewel nodded, though she still looked concerned. "I'll do everything I can, but we need to be careful. Gunner is on a knife's edge right now. This could help him, or it could push him further away." Eliana finally nodded, her decision made. "Very well. We will proceed, but we must be cautious. I will guide the magic, Eli will handle the mechanics, and Jewel will ensure his body is strong enough to endure the fusion." Darren pushed off the wall, stepping closer to the group. "And what about me? Where do I fit in?" Eliana gave him a small, knowing smile. "You will be by his side. He will need his brother to remind him of his strength, his humanity." Darren smirked, though there was no humour in his eyes. "I've got his back. Always have." The group began discussing the logistics of the procedure, with Eli outlining the design and the necessary steps to integrate the arm with Gunner's body. Jewel listed the medical precautions they would need to take, and Eliana's soft, commanding voice filled the room as she explained the magical components. Darren listened quietly, absorbing it all, but his thoughts were focused on Gunner. His brother had always been the strongest man he knew, but now he wasn't so sure. Gunner had faced unimaginable things no one should have to fight, and it had left scars, both seen and unseen. But if there was one thing Darren knew for sure, it was that Gunner wasn't done fighting. Not yet. And neither was he. Eliana's portal. As they finalized their plans, a sudden shift in the room's energy signaled Eliana preparing to depart. Darren stepped back again as she raised her staff, the silver glow intensifying. With a single fluid motion, she slammed the base of the staff into the floor, and a shimmering portal began to form before her, swirling with the same otherworldly light Darren had seen earlier. He watched, awestruck once more, as the portal opened, revealing a glimpse of the realm beyond. The air around them crackled with energy, and Darren felt the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. Eliana turned to them, her gaze lingering on Eli and Jewel. "I will return when the time is right. Prepare everything for the fusion, and I will ensure Gunner's spirit remains intact." With that, she stepped through the portal, and as quickly as it had appeared, the gateway closed behind her, leaving the room in an eerie silence. Darren blinked, rubbing his face with both hands. "You guys really live like this every day?" Eli gave him a wry smile. "Welcome to our world, Darren." Eli paced back and forth, her mind racing with thoughts and concerns about the upcoming procedure for Gunner. The more she thought about it, the more uneasy she became. The fusion of technology and magic was risky under normal circumstances, but with Gunner's current state, both mentally and physically, the risks seemed even greater. She turned toward Jewel and Darren, her expression filled with uncertainty. What if we test it first? Not on Gunner, but on someone who's already stronger, someone who's already adapted to this kind of change. Jewel looked up from the plans they had been reviewing, her brow furrowing. Test it? On who? Eli hesitated for a moment, then her eyes shifted to Desera, who was sitting on the far side of the room, meticulously cleaning and inspecting her weapons as usual. Desera had lost her leg in battle and had been living with a prosthetic ever since. But unlike Gunner, she had come to terms with her injury in her own way, adapting to the change and growing stronger for it. "What if we ask Desera?" Eli suggested, her voice cautious. "She's already stronger now, and she won't have the same complications we're worried about with Gunner. She's been through this kind of thing before, and if the fusion works for her, we'll have a better idea of what to expect when we do it for Gunner." Jewel blinked, considering Eli's idea. It could give us a chance to refine the process, figure out the potential complications before we put Gunner through it. Darren crossed his arms, glancing over at Desera. "You really think she'd agree to that? I mean, she's tough as nails, but asking her to go through something like this before Gunner..." "She's stronger now physically and mentally," Eli said, cutting him off. "And we'd be honest with her about the risks. If she agrees, it might actually help Gunner to see someone else go through it first. He needs hope. He needs to see that it's possible." Jewel nodded slowly. "You might be right, but we have to be careful. Desera is not just a soldier to be experimented on. We need her consent, and we need to make sure she fully understands what this would mean." "I'll talk to her," Eli said, her mind already made up. "She's been through hell, but she's strong enough to handle this. And if she's willing, it could give Gunner a fighting chance." Darren sighed and shrugged. "I mean, I guess it's worth a shot. She might even be up for it if you explain the benefits." Eli nodded and walked toward Desera, who was still focused on her weapons. As she approached, Desiree looked up, her keen eyes narrowing slightly in curiosity. "What's up, Eli?" Desiree asked, her voice calm but with a hint of wariness. Eli took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "Desiree, I've been working on a new prosthetic design, one that could be fused with both technology and magic. It's something I've been preparing for Gunnar, but it's risky. I was wondering if you would consider being the first to go through with the fusion." Desiree raised an eyebrow, her sharp gaze locking onto Eli's. "You want to test it on me?" "I don't want to test it on you," Eli clarified. "But I think if we can successfully merge your prosthetic with magic, it could pave the way for Gunnar. You're stronger now, both physically and mentally, and I believe you could handle this in a way that Gunnar can't yet. This isn't just for him, it's for you too." Desiree remained silent for a moment, her eyes drifting to her prosthetic leg. She flexed it slightly, considering Eli's words. "And what are the risks?" "There are always risks when you're dealing with magic and tech," Eli admitted. "But we would take every precaution. Eliana would assist with the magic, Jewel would monitor your vitals, and I'd handle the mechanics. If it works, your leg would be more than just a prosthetic. It would be an extension of you, stronger and more adaptable than anything you've had before." Desiree's lips curled into a small smirk. "You're not one for half measures, are you?" Eli gave a small, determined smile. "I'm trying to help Gunnar. But I won't do this without your consent, Desiree. It's your decision." Desiree stood up, leaning on her prosthetic leg as she studied Eli's face. "If it'll help Gunnar, I'm in. I've fought with this thing for long enough. It's time I see what you can really do." Eli's eyes lit up with relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Desiree. We'll get started as soon as we can." Desiree nodded firmly. "Just make sure it works, Eli. I don't like surprises." With that, Eli turned back to Jewel and Darren, a sense of hope rising within her. They now had a plan, and it could be the key to helping both Desiree and Gunnar reclaim their strength. A week had passed since Desiree had agreed to be the first to undergo the fusion of technology and magic. During that time, Eli had poured herself into the design of the new prosthetic leg. She spent countless hours perfecting every detail, incorporating not just the cutting-edge tech that Desiree had already been using, but also the magic that would bind it to her body, making it more than just a replacement. It would be a part of her. When the design was finally ready, Eli took a deep breath, gathering the blueprints and the prototype leg, and made her way to Desiree's quarters. The weight of the project sat heavy on her shoulders. If this worked, it would change everything, for Desiree, for Gunnar, for all of them. But there was still the question of whether Desiree would approve of the design and the features Eli had chosen to include. As Eli approached, she knocked lightly on the door, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Moments later, Desiree opened the door, her expression as calm and focused as ever. "Come on in," Desiree said, stepping aside to let Eli into the room. Eli walked inside, laying the blueprints on the table and placing the prototype leg next to them. She turned to face Desiree, who had already crossed her arms and was studying the leg with her usual sharp-eyed gaze. "I've finished the design," Eli said, her voice steady but hopeful. "But before we go any further, I wanted to get your input. I want to make sure it's exactly what you need." Desiree stepped forward, her eyes moving over the sleek lines of the prosthetic leg, inspecting it carefully. The metallic surface was smooth but etched with subtle runes designed to channel the magic that would bind the leg to her body. Eli had incorporated a range of practical features: enhanced durability, the ability to adjust to various terrains, and a hidden compartment for storage. But there was always room for improvement, and Desiree's feedback was crucial. "It looks impressive," Desiree admitted, her fingers tracing the surface of the leg. "You've put a lot of thought into this." Eli nodded. "I did. But I need to know what you think. Is there anything you want changed or added?" Desiree was quiet for a moment, her sharp eyes narrowing as she considered the question. Then, she glanced back at Eli. There are a couple of things that come to mind. I need something more adaptive when I'm in combat, something that can shift on the fly. If I'm on uneven ground or fighting on unstable terrain, I need this leg to adjust faster. Eli listened carefully, nodding as she mentally took note of Desera's request. I can make the terrain response system more intuitive. It'll adapt in real time based on your movements and the environment around you. Anything else? Desera thought for a moment longer, then smirked. Is there room for a hidden blade? You know I like to keep a few tricks up my sleeve. Eli chuckled, shaking her head. I can add that in, no problem. I'll incorporate it into the frame so it can extend and retract when needed. Desera nodded approvingly. Good. And I'd like to be able to power through magic surges if necessary. If I find myself in a situation where I need more, let's call it endurance, I want the option to channel more energy into it. That's already built into the runes, Eli explained. You'll be able to channel magic directly into the leg if you need to enhance its strength or speed temporarily. I've also added some safety measures to make sure the energy flow stays balanced so you won't overload it. Desera leaned back, crossing her arms as she gave Eli a small, satisfied nod. All right, Eli, I like it. You've thought of everything. Eli let out a quiet breath of relief. I wanted to make sure it fit your style and needs. I know this is a big step, and I'm committed to making it as seamless as possible. Desera gave a half smile, her confidence unwavering. I appreciate it. If this works, it'll be a game changer. Not just for me, but for Gunnar too. He needs to see that this is possible, that we can keep fighting even when we've been knocked down. Eli nodded, the weight of Desera's words sinking in. That's the goal. I'm going to start the final adjustments right away. We'll be ready soon. Desera placed a hand on Eli's shoulder, her grip firm. You've done good work, Eli. I trust you with this. Let's make it happen. With that, Eli gathered up the blueprints and the prototype, her mind already racing with ideas for the final enhancements. She left Desera's quarters with renewed determination, knowing that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. As she worked on the final version of the prosthetic, Eli couldn't help but think about Gunnar. He had been distant, struggling with his own demons, but if this worked, it might give him the hope he needed to reclaim his strength. And if Desera could emerge from this stronger than ever, maybe, just maybe, Gunnar could too. The future was uncertain, but Eli knew one thing for sure. They would face whatever came next, together. As Darren wandered through the armory, his sharp eyes scanned the rows of weapons, his mind whirring as he took in the array of high-tech gear and mystical artifacts. It was a strange sight, this mix of the futuristic and the arcane. He couldn't deny the craftsmanship, but there was a part of him that still didn't fully grasp the scope of what was really happening. As he continued to explore, Darren's gaze landed on a weapon that stood apart from the rest, sleek and powerful, with an aura that seemed to pulse with latent energy. The rifle was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Its barrel was etched with glowing runes, and the design, though futuristic, had a certain ancient quality to it, something otherworldly. Darren approached it, his fingers itching to hold it, to feel the weight of it in his hands. Starbreaker, he muttered to himself, reading the name engraved on the side. Just as he reached out to touch it, a voice broke the silence. That's Gunnar's rifle! Darren turned to see Eli standing in the doorway, her pointed ears catching the light in a way that still made Darren do a double-take. She stepped inside, her eyes following his gaze to Starbreaker, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Darren raised an eyebrow and took a step back, his hands raised in a mock gesture of surrender. Didn't mean to touch anything. Just admiring the hardware. Eli chuckled softly as she approached, her hands brushing over the rifle affectionately, as if it were a beloved companion. It's more than just hardware. Starbreaker's been with Gunnar for a long time. It's saved his life, and the lives of others, More times than I can count. Darren folded his arms, leaning against a nearby table as he watched her. Looks like one hell of a weapon. But there's more to it, isn't there? Some kind of magic, I'm guessing. Eli nodded, her expression turning thoughtful. Yes, but it's not just any magic. Starbreaker was crafted to harness the power of the Starlight Gem, a powerful artifact that Gunnar found during one of our missions. It can amplify the energy of the gem, allowing him to channel that power through the rifle's rounds. It's not just about precision or firepower. Starbreaker can target demonic energy, disrupt it, and even destroy it. Darren let out a low whistle, clearly impressed. So it's like a demon hunter's dream, huh? You could say that, Eli replied, a hint of pride in her voice. Gunnar's the only one who can wield it properly. It's as much a part of him as any of the other weapons he carries. Darren tilted his head, his expression turning a little more serious. I've known Gunnar a long time, but I've never seen him rely on a weapon like this before. He's always been one to get by with grit, instinct, and the standard military issue. Seems like a lot's changed. Eli's smile faded slightly, her gaze softening as she ran her fingers along the barrel of Starbreaker. A lot has changed. The threats we're facing now, they aren't something you can fight with conventional weapons or even with the training you and Gunnar had in the military. This world, the things that lurk in the shadows, the forces we've come up against, it takes more than just skill. It takes knowledge, courage, and sometimes magic. Darren rubbed the back of his neck, his eyes flicking back to the rifle. I hear ya. But I'm not exactly the magic type. I can't say I fully get it, but I trust Gunnar. If he's in the middle of all this, then I'll do my part. Eli looked at him, her eyes studying him carefully. You may not understand magic, but you understand Gunnar. And right now, that's just as important. He's going through a lot, physically, mentally. He needs his team, his family. And I think, whether he admits it or not, he needs you. Darren sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know he does. That's why I'm here. I'll stand by him no matter what. I've always had his back, and that won't change. But this is a whole new ball game. Eli gave a small nod of understanding, her eyes drifting back to Starbreaker. It is, but you're a quick learner. You've already proven that. Darren smirked, glancing around the armory one more time. Guess I'll have to pick up a few tricks, huh? Eli grinned, the weight of the conversation lifting slightly. I have a feeling you'll be just fine. Darren's gaze fell back to Starbreaker. He'll come around, you know, he said, his tone softening. He's just got a lot to process, but he'll find his way. Eli met his gaze, her expression filled with hope. I know he will. He always does. As Darren and Eli stood there, the weight of their shared mission settling between them, they both knew that while the path ahead was uncertain, they weren't walking it alone. Gunnar had his pack, and now, with Darren back at his side, he had the strength of old bonds to help carry him forward. Whatever battles lay ahead, they would face them together.